Amanda, thank you so much for chatting with me today. As I was saying before we hit record, I'm excited to start recording just chats with practitioners who are in this space because there's so many more of us now, and it's so exciting to see that applied quantum biology and light circadian signaling is now something that clinicians, regardless of where they were coming from before, are finding, and they're starting to apply it in clinical practice. And I know you and we've known each other for a while now, it seems like. And so I'd love for you to kind of tell people what brought you to applying light and easy water strategies in clinical practice. And then we'll go from there, maybe what you're doing currently, what you love, how you love working with clients, and what you see is supporting them.
Awesome. Well, yay, Carrie. This is so cool. Well, I remember when I first found you on Instagram, it was, I don't know, many years ago, 2020, I guess.
Right.
And I actually reached out and you responded, which was so cool. And I was intrigued, and you mentioned all these names and these books and whatnot. And since then, I've proceeded to devour all of that information that you shared. Right. But what got me interested in this, and what got me on Instagram's algorithm radar, because then, all these cool things started getting fed to me, was, like many people, personal health issues. I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was 15. I was a piano player, and I couldn't play the piano. And initially, before even the official label came, everybody was like, oh, you got to change your technique. You got to put your wrist like this and not like this, because the other thing is it's affected only my wrists. In retrospect, looking back, I'm like, okay, probably came on the heels of a round of vaccinations in order to get into high school. I lived in Argentina at the time. I'm from Argentina originally. It also is on the heels of hormonal changes, puberty. It's also on the heels of the stresses of, teen life and school and all those things, right? And so anyway, that led me on a 10, 20-year journey of trying to figure out what it was and how to deal with chronic pain. And I did finish, obviously I finished high school. I went on to college, started out as a piano performance major, but had to stop because I couldn't play. So I switched over, finished off as a music composition major. That was I love music. That's my original sort of thing. But in the process of dealing with pain, trying to figure out what was going on, I became interested in medicine and the biomedical sciences. And so I ended up coming up to the States to go to graduate school. Along the way, I met amazing physicians who were able to help me get through with conventional medicine, get the inflammation under control and all that jazz. Got married, had kids. And then, what was it? That year before COVID hit, I was already primed for a revelation. And so then the whole COVID thing precipitated that revelation, fed into it. And it was beautiful because at the same time that I discovered light, I also discovered primitive reflex integration using rhythmic movement training. And I also decided to quit my job at the medical school, teaching neuroanatomy, gross anatomy. I did research for a number of years before that in spinal cord injury related topics. So it all kind of happened together. And I went back to school. I'm still working through courses for traditional naturopathy. I get distracted. I go down rabbit holes. It's my problem. But the rabbit holes are cool. Applied quantum biology certification, BRMT, so rhythmic movement training consultant, instructor for level 1. And it's been a fascinating, fascinating journey. The whole pain situation that I dealt for decades is now gone. It's been so cool. I'm so thankful for my body, for our bodies. They're so amazing. And that's really the thing that permeates my practice now, is inspiring people to rediscover their amazing bodies, to be in awe of what we're capable of doing if we give our bodies the right inputs.
Yeah, I love your story. It is so inspiring on so many levels. And it actually also, just kind of what you're saying, does remind me of, I believe this was a summit or a conference talk, and I loved the title. It's like, what if our bodies were brilliant, right? They are.
Yeah.
Right. It's this idea that we're trying to fix what's wrong as opposed to understanding that when you give your body the correct inputs and nourishment, and that nourishment doesn't just mean food, right? There's a lot of ways we can nourish. The body knows how to come back into health and homeostasis. And so
Yeah.
you are such a beautiful story. It's so inspiring.
Mm. What's hard is waiting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's hard is being consistent, even when you don't feel different or better. And because we've been brainwashed, especially for the last 150 years, there's been this massive move to moving people into their left brains, linear thinking, mechanistic, completely reductionist, cause and effect sort of thing, and moving us away from a right brain sort of approach to life, which is whole, which is really truly quantum. And so in that process, we forget that so many other things are happening at the same time, and we must honor the process. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. The other thing that's really inspiring about your journey is like, and I remember our conversation really pretty clearly about like, yeah, I don't know if I want to teach anymore. It's like, is this really can this really be a thing? It was like, can I really, and it takes so much courage to do what you did, to go from something that maybe wasn't a good fit for you anymore to diving into your passions. And now you are a clinician with so many cool tools in your tool belt to help people with.
mm.
So can you tell us a little bit more, go into like, what would you say as a clinician, if someone were to come to you, what are the main things you look at to support them on teaching their bodies that they are brilliant?
So I remember going through some marketing thing a couple years ago about you have to zero in on your unique message, right? And all that kind of stuff. But it was kind of cool because the three things that really did it for me are essentially my pillars: rest, light, and water. And they are all essential. Not one is more important than the other. Um, they become the side windows through which I access a specific situation and what resonates with that particular person. And I learned this from you and from a couple other people. Even though their light diet is trash, maybe right now telling them to block artificial light is not going to resonate with them. So you can't get anywhere. So what works? I will say though, even though all three pillars are essential, conveying a sense of safety to the system is key. I'm diving deep into, I'm trying to wrap my brain on a better level on the whole idea of cell danger response, as a cellular representation or cellular level view of the stress response, the more broader umbrella term that everybody talks about in the context of ebbing and flowing between a sympathetic and a parasympathetic state. And it really all comes down to safety. And how do you promote that? How do you encourage that? And so that's what I've been learning. And my mentor, Dave Boyland, started talking about that early on in our mentorship relationship. And at first I looked at him like he had 10 heads. I was like, what do you mean? He said, listen to the system, don't listen to the words, or listen to the words, but don't listen to the words. I was like, what do you mean? Well, what they're saying, how they're saying it, what's their body language, what are their eyes looking like, what does their skin look like, the ears, are they red, are they not red, are they even making eye contact with you or not? And some of the choice wording is key to help you understand where on that stress path they are, right?
Sure.
And then helping them feel safe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sarah Kleiner and I co-teach a course on fertility together. And we used to, we would talk a little bit about mindset and words and thoughts and language and self-talk. And we were like, this is an important piece, but I don't think people realized how important it was.
Oh my
We
gosh.
moved it from being like module number 6 to module number 1.
Yeah.
Because truly a lot of our safety signals come from how we are thinking and like what we're surrounding ourselves with and the words we're choosing to use or the way we're describing our situation. And so as a clinician, it's so key what you just said there. The way people say things and how they say things really can give you a good read as to, okay, this is an individual who I think, even though they're trying their hardest with X, Y, and Z, really truly needs to help their body feel like it's in a safe space again.
Mhm.
And a lot of that language is also a language of being a victim. And again, no judgment, because it's so hard. These chronic, decades-long healing journeys. It's kind of easy to say, well, I have Lyme, or I'm in pain.
Right.
But is that ultimately serving the client long term to help them move into that sense of safety?
Yeah. Well, I love how James Clear goes about the whole atomic habit idea,
Mm.
and not setting yourself a goal of, say, losing 100 pounds, but create yourself. What's your new identity? What's that new identity that's going to actually be the reason why you can achieve the goal? And the same happens in the health and wellness space. I'm not a Lyme patient. I'm not a juvenile rheumatoid arthritis lady. I am an incredible human being with an incredible body that is reflecting the state of my real true identity. And so, I mean, part of a year or two ago, I would go out in the winter, do my walks, my UVA walks, and I'd be talking to my body. I still do. And I believe, I don't know how we could test this from a research perspective, but still every now and then my right hip starts, aching when I'm walking, and I talk to it. And I really have this vision in my mind that my words, the frequencies that are being emitted as I think, as I speak, are literally somehow having an effect on all the molecules and all the genes and all the enzymes and all the hormones and all the metabolites that are mediating that cell danger response.
100%. Well, that's the water, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so I'm like, okay, let's do this. It's free. Number
Yeah,
one. I believe there's a time and a place for all these other interventions and gadgets and biohacks and whatever, but I mean, this is the ultimate biohack, really.
it ultimately is. Are you familiar with the work of Bill Bankston?
No.
Okay, Bill is
How
someone
do you
who's
spell
been,
it?
I know, well, maybe you'll find him under William Bankston, Bengston. So Sarah pointed me to him recently. I actually got his book a long time ago. But it was easier for me to understand through a video, like podcast interviews, and hearing him. He developed basically a fast imaging technique. So an image cycling technique. It hits the nail on the head with exactly what you're describing there. It's like you wanted to view yourself as doing the activities of a thriving state of you, right? Like
Mhm.
you in that. And that's exactly what his image cycling technique goes. He says, yes, people maybe want, pain-free knees, but they can't be focusing on, I need pain-free knees. I need pain-free knees. You need to focus on, well, I want to go, why do I want pain-free knees? Well, I want to go skiing.
Right.
Or I want to be able to, hike for miles, and so that's the image that we put in our mind of that particular version of ourselves. And there is absolutely an energetic quality that pulls us to that
Yeah.
version. He even did it, Amanda, it'll blow your mind. He even did it with mice that were set to have cancer in a cage. Like these mice that were injected with a certain substance, 100% of them will die within about a 21-day period. So this is and this is a great mouse model to study for cancer. And what he found, he had the image of putting his hands on the cage and seeing the end of the experiment that he did, basically clinking champagne glasses with his experimental buddies because the experiment had been a success. That was his mental image. It wasn't, I must cure these animals of cancer, because he's like, I don't know what to do to cure these. He's like, I want to just see success as an endpoint here. And that's what my image is. Every single one of those mice was cured of cancer. And that had never happened before. And this has been
I
repeated.
I believe it because, and I love it. I get chills because lately I've been, as a mom, you want the best for your kids. There's things, that are going on, and you're trying to sort through them and whatnot. And I was getting really frustrated with the eye rolling,
Yeah.
the light habits, the sleep hygiene, the whatever, And it finally hit me the other day. I was like, no, it's everything that I'm doing for me is not just for me. Because I am eternally connected to my kids, thanks to our mitochondria, thanks to the ether and that connection, and the power of prayer is incredible and undeniable, but also the power of habit. And so I'm changing that mindset, and I'm starting on my walks, especially. I visualize and I truly believe what I'm doing is benefiting them too. What I'm doing right now is setting them up for a life of abundance and a life of success and a life of fulfillment, and it's just a really cool and empowering feeling. It feels weird. A lot of people are like, oh, whatever, that's woo. I don't believe that anymore. It's just really cool. And I think, again, putting the hands on, it's so cool, right? To believe that you have that effect. I was going to say that power. I don't know that that's the right word. But it's all because we're all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with kids, that whole thing. So, these idea of fields. And again, people, this may be way too out there until you, I think, go down enough of these rabbit holes to realize this stuff. But the idea of these fields, I think that there is this overarching morphogenetic field for human species, for animal, like each species essentially has a field of energy and information to tap into. That's why we have things like the 100th monkey effect, where like a critical mass of species species learns a new behavior, and then it essentially becomes disseminated to every species. I am a believer of that in a household unit, or at least in a family unit as well. It's like, if, and I've seen this enough, and I used to think it was just modeling the behavior. I think very little of it actually, well, some of it's modeling, but I think some of it is like, I'll do things while family's at work, kids are at school. No one would have any clue that I'm doing these things to support my own health. And I start to then see it getting picked up in my family in different ways. And so I'm like, there has to be a field effect there, right? Like you said, an entanglement or a field effect where they're essentially pulling in from the energy and information that I'm putting out and trying to contribute to the household.
Yeah. And another thing that confirms that this is something real. For example, I have picked up habits in my adulthood and interests, herbs, gardening, especially for medicinal and culinary herbs. My mom never did that. My dad sort of did that, but not really. My great grandma, who I never met, did it. And I didn't learn until I was sharing this with my mom that was one of her passions, for instance, stuff like that. So I was like, how does this happen, right? How do these, and then the whole idea of, consistency and going out, and again, just like we can, quote unquote, inherit badness, disease, whatnot, we can also be the recipients and the beneficiaries of goodness. And we can also be the cycle breakers.
Yeah. Totally.
And that's the other thing, once you realize that that's happening, it's like you have no choice. You have to be the cycle breaker. You can't just say, no, I changed my mind.
Yeah, you can't look back when you have that. Okay, let's go back just a little bit more to your clinical application of things. So rest, light, and water within the foundation of safety. What are some things that you try to highlight? Let's say someone comes to you in a first session. What does that look like? Where maybe they've learned nothing about their light environment, or maybe they've heard the tip of the iceberg on circadian rhythm, or maybe that's like, water, isn't that just what I drink? I'm filtering my water. Like, where do you go with those general categories for people?
Well, it really depends on each person. And it depends on, so I've learned to ask what and how. What can I do for you? How can I help you? And then I'm finding that it helps to just ask them to more specifically narrow down on one thing. If there's one thing that you want changed today, what is it? And it really forces them to think, because it's not an easy question to answer. And more often than not, we go first the primitive reflex integration route, which is a very beautiful, easy tool to begin to bring rest back into the system.
Can you tell us about that a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely. So primitive reflexes are what I call our superpower. We are born during development, from 5 weeks conception onward, we start exhibiting reflexive movements that happen. They are reflexive, so they happen in response to different stimuli. And each movement pattern begets the next and forms a foundation for the next and the next and the next. And there's an order of operations, a timeline. And if that timeline and that order of operations is respected, then the system, the baby continues developing and growing and doing what it needs to do. These reflexes, a lot of them develop or integrate and lead way for others to develop in the moment of birth, through the birth canal, during the moment of coming out into the system and being exposed to the crushing pressure of gravity. I mean, all those things are tremendously important inputs that set the baby up for success. And then all through the next 12 to 18, 24 months postnatal development, additional reflexive movements start showing up in response to stimuli. That's why the tummy time is so important. That's why, being in mom's arms is so important, even after being born, because of the rhythmic and the connection to mom's heart postnatal. And what happens is, if at any point this order of operations, this timeline is not honored or is disrupted due to inputs that cause chaos, that cause noise, then the system adapts to the best of its ability, maladapts in most situations. A lot of cases, babies are born healthy with all their reflexes active, and then they disappear to lead to postural reflexes that are going to be lifelong. But something happens later in life, trauma, bullying in school, slipping, a fight. It could be big T trauma, what have you, vaccine injuries, exposure to non-native electromagnetic frequencies. All of these things will affect the proper communication of the different layers of the brain. And when this happens, the primitive reflexes that ordinarily will disappear with time show up again.
Oh, interesting. Can you give me a concrete example? I'd love to hear, like, what could that look like exactly?
Yeah. So there's a reflex that develops in the birth canal called the spinal galant reflex. And it affects the curvature of the spine and the right-left balance. And a lot of babies who don't experience the birth canal completely, so C-section babies, will have an active spinal galant past the time that it should be active. And this will affect development and integration of other reflexes. One of them, for instance, is the symmetric tonic neck reflex, the STNR. And so a lot of these C-section babies never crawl, for instance. They're fine otherwise, right? They're perfectly beautiful humans. They're with it. A lot of them are bedwetters, way past the age that they should be. And all of these, when active beyond their date of expiration, shall we say, are foundational for the development of ADHD. And so a lot of the people that started getting trained in this work were teachers and occupational therapists in the educational system, because they found that these movements that they have the kids do as part of the therapy help reintegrate those reflexes. And all of a sudden now they can sit, and within reason, right? Because kids are kids, pay attention to the board ahead of the class and not be disruptors or disrupted. And so what the primitive reflex integration technique that we use does is it essentially has the person do movements that replicate those reflexive movements that we used to do during development. And our theory, my theory, this is my opinion, I never met the physician who put these together, but he was onto something. I'm going to tell you in a bit why, because you're gonna love it. My theory is that these movements are bringing information into the system that conveys safety, because the nervous system, the water, the fascia says, oh, I remember that. I used to be able to do that. Okay, we're good. Now I'm on firm footing, on territory that I remember. And so little by little, that movement is creating piezoelectricity in the fascia. These are all my theories. I have to figure out how to test them. But this whole thing is affecting the body water and increasing and enhancing proper information that will eventually release cell danger response, release tight fascia, And this is what happens. You know, a lot of these kids, especially kids, respond more readily to this more quickly than adults. Now are less disruptive. They have a better ability to manage emotions. Bedwetters stop being bedwetters. ADHD presentations are now not as prevalent. In adults, the biggest thing is pain, chronic pain management, or not even management, resolution, and anxiety, depression type presentations are benefited by these movements because these are acting at the level of the brainstem. The brainstem is a very, very busy neighborhood, all kinds of things going on, namely, all the light pathways, all the cranial nerves that are moving the eyeballs and vagus, and inputs and outputs to the hypothalamus with sympathetics. I mean, it's nuts. From a neuroanatomy point, I nerded out when I started learning about this. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. How come more people don't know about this? This has to be a thing. And so the founder, Dr. Harold Blomberg, was a Swedish psychiatrist. He passed away in 2020, but one of his students is the US distributor, Kate Wagner. She always talks about how Harold, way into his years using this with ADHD, autistic kids, and the gamut of psychiatric presentations, he got to the point where he would say to the parents, I cannot work with your child unless you agree to mitigate non-native EMFs and mitigate dairy and wheat because of the glyphosate. He didn't know exactly why. I think he did. He was Swedish. Most of his work had to get translated. And so, Swedish, English, a lot gets lost in translation, but I would have loved to have met him and talked to him, because I think he'd be all over this quantum stuff and the fourth phase water. I believe
Mitochondria.
that. What's that?
And mitochondria.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So like the integration dots that are connecting in my brain are like, mitochondria are essentially the ones that are either perceiving a cell that's copacetic and continuing healthy biophotonic signaling to the DNA, to the membrane, or they're hurrying to sequester calcium because it's flooding in, or they're right or yeah, exactly, or they're doing something that makes them not focus fully on their oxidative phosphorylation, their healthy metabolic activity. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have massive reactive oxygen species that can signal a huge danger response to the cell, to the immune system that lives outside of the cell. Yeah, that's all connected. I love it. And it does, to me, it does go back to that water being a receiver of information. So a receiver, a transmitter, a memory storer, like you said, like in our body. So I'm from what you're saying, I'm picturing in our body's water network, specifically likely associated with the fascia. We're designed to essentially have imprints of all of these reflexes that we can pull from. And if there's exactly. And if they're not there, or we had to maladapt because of a situation with it, then the imprint is just not in essentially the correct configuration. And we almost need to reconfigure it, re-imprint that water in order for that safety signal to be ingrained in that fascial network. Communicates to the brainstem, everything's okay, right? And back and forth and back and forth. Yeah. So cool.
And then when you start looking at fascia mode of information transfer versus, action potential, how one is super slow, it's surface roads, and the other one is so ridiculously fast. And then you start realizing, well, hold on a second. The neuron itself is everything is fascia.
And water.
And because all of the fascia structural proteins have to have their little hydration shell, like you say. But even so, think about the neuron. The extracellular matrix is fascia, hydrated fascia. The neuron cell membrane with those integrins connecting the extracellular matrix to the inside of the neuron, the cytoskeleton, it's all fascia. And then, it's just a thing of beauty. The system is a thing of beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk more along the level of like reflexes, people I think do think neurons. When I think reflex, I think almost primitive. And I think what did creatures have before there was a fully developed nervous system? they had fascia and water that was responsive, right? Picture these little sea sponges and things that don't have a fully integrated nervous system that can react still
Yeah.
and store that reaction in their, likely in their water, in their fascial, in their
Yeah.
hydrophilic surfaces. That to me is why the speed that you alluded to, the speed of our fascial communication is up to 1,000 times faster than that of our neurons, because of the fact that I think it really is this primitive, ultra fast communication that we developed way back in the day before we were
It's
even
beyond
humans.
electricity. It's electromagnetic, right? I
Exactly.
mean, I always think about the in vitro, the petri dish experiments where you stain the cells and you're able to see the cells and they're still alive in the matrix and in the medium, right? And you put in a pipette and you're looking at them through the microscope and you see the cell membrane retract away from the pipette. They're not a fully functioning nervous system the way we learn in neuroanatomy, but they're there and they're responsive to the environment. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And so the fear paralysis reflex is one of the first ones that is cataloged, and that it's not an official primitive reflex, but we talk about it in the business because it is a foundation for our stress response.
Yeah.
And that fear paralysis reflex has been recorded as appearing as early as 5 weeks post-conception.
Wow.
Isn't
Wow.
that crazy? And if you have a fear paralysis reflex that doesn't integrate properly, then the Moro reflex can't develop. And the Moro reflex is this foundational reflex in nature. We see it in all, mammals, particularly, holding on for dear life, baby monkey to mama monkey while she's going through the jungle, doing whatever she needs to do. I remember seeing it in my kids when I was changing diapers. And those are first few months. The Moro develops in utero about 3 months post-conception, and it is entirely present and active all through development, during birth, up until 4 months postnatal. And if that Moro doesn't integrate properly, then the official foundation for sympathetic and parasympathetic, the tendon guard reflex, can't develop. And so, these are some of the other reflexes that we learn in rhythmic movement training. And here's another beautiful example. You know how babies nurse, right? They're moving their mouths, their lips, their tongue, the suck reflex, and so on and so forth. But they'll also be massaging mom's boob, mom's breast.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And if you remember when your baby's nurse, they're moving their feet, their toes, they're fanning out and they're crunching and whatever. Those are 3 powerful reflexes developing at the same time.
Wow.
Babkin, plantar and Babinski, and the suck reflex. And when babies don't nurse, those reflexes don't get the time needed. And those are foundational. Babinski is foundational for, Babinski is the one active classically in people who end up with hip replacement surgeries.
Interesting.
So.
Wow, this is so cool. I love this stuff. I love this stuff. And what I'm hearing is like that you have such this amazing training in these reflexes and how, they've maybe not been developed appropriately and what that then can tie into, or what that can look like later on in life as a manifestation of some form of dis-ease or cell danger. But then also a foundation where, okay, obviously the sense of safety is key. And that sense of safety isn't just, like we said, the words. For me, the sense of safety is, am I under crazy flickering lights? Do I know what time of day it is? Am I connected to the Schumann resonance and Schumann harmonics for my brain to get into the correct brainwave cascade? And so I can totally see how all of these things for you just like really integrate into just such a fun clinical practice for you.
It's fun, and yet it's very heart-wrenching because I didn't know really, I didn't start out with a particular client in mind. I wasn't sure how this was going to go. The majority of the people that I'm working with are these beautiful women, middle-aged, some of them a little older, 60s. And I have the honor to just come alongside them in the thick of their healing crisis. And that's not easy. And I would have never chosen that. But here I am. And I'll take it. I mean, anything that can support them. Sorry, my dog's coming in. So it is fun. It's fun when you see them finally come out the other side. but the through the forest part is not pretty.
It's hard. I totally understand what you're saying on that one. And as a clinician, I think that's where it's important for us also to make sure we stay engaged in our own restorative practices, because it really is easy to take on burden.
Yeah.
And for me, I do feel like I need to be able to release that, you know, energetically, so that I can continue to show up for people.
But
so
it's pretty.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When I was thinking about doing this, I worried about burnout. And I shared this in the past to a couple other people, because I saw it all the time in the clinic, in the doctors that I would work in the midst, right? At the medical school, my husband. And so I asked Dave, my mentor, how do you deal with burnout? And he looked at me, he's like, what do you mean? Well, you know, burnout. Well, yeah, I know what you mean, but when I'm now finally doing something that I know I'm called to do, I'm not burned out. He said, you remember what it felt like when we were doing XYZ on so and so, how their stomach started gurgling and all of a sudden you started gurgling too, and you apologize because you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I should have had breakfast or something like that. That's your parasympathetic in resonance with theirs. You are getting as much benefit from supporting them as they are from receiving. And so when you're in sync with what you're supposed to be doing, there is no such thing as burnout. Of course, you have to be, careful and just take time and nourish yourself. But I thought that was beautiful, and I can honestly say now I'm living it too. Hey.
That's so cool. No, I love it. I love this. And I'm so excited to be able to share your, I don't know, just your expertise with people, you know, in my little way, to maybe put on my YouTube channel, give it to people, because I think there's people out there who know that there might be a way to support themselves that they just don't know yet. You know, you don't know until you know it's there.
Right.
But as soon as you start to hear it, it begins to click, and it just makes so much sense. And it's like, wow, this person is speaking to me. And I think that that's going to be you for so many people. Continued, Amanda. And I really hope that, you know, you continue to grow and thrive and just, you know, be fulfilled in whatever that looks like in terms of clinical practice, because you have so many gifts to give. And it's just exciting to see you light up talking about this stuff. It's just been so much fun. I've learned so much from you, and it's just been a joy to have our paths cross that many years ago and continue to cross to this day. So I'm just grateful for that.
Yeah, and I'm grateful too. It's really neat.
So, listen, if people are listening to this and the way you're talking about the reflexes and feeling safe and the sleep, so the rest, the light, the water, if that resonates with them, are you taking on new clients, or what would be the best way to maybe learn more about you and what you offer? Just give some contact information.
Yeah, I am taking on clients. The business is slowly but surely growing.
Great.
1-2 people at a time, and it's great. That's a pace that works for me. I have a website. The business is called Horaios Wellness. Horaios. If you can't roll your R, don't worry. Work with me, and you will. It's a Greek word that means the right time, and it's a word that I just could not. It's been with me since my teens. And when I was trying to come up with a name for the business, they're like, pick something easier. People are not going to remember. And I tried, but this is it. And it's beautiful because it is the right time. It's the right time for me, and it's the right time for anybody who comes my way. I work one-on-one with people. I do in person once a week here at the local clinic where I work with Dave Boyland, but I do Zoom all the time. I really want to grow my group coaching practice because my real passion is to beef up, to build community. And for sure, community in person, which is little by little happening too. For about 1.5 years now, almost 2 years this spring, I've been giving monthly talks at the local yoga studio, bringing in the water and the light and the rhythmic movement training to the community, and it's growing. It's a small little group of women who want this for themselves and for their kids, and it's really cool. But I want that online too. I have a lot of people that I know out of the country and out west and so forth. There's a lot of these online communities, right? But I do feel called to have that as an offer, and the group coaching is something that is near and dear to my heart. I have about 4 ladies right now, but I really want that one to grow because we learn from others. And one of the things that I bring to this group coaching is, in addition to all these concepts and troubleshooting and working them out for each person, is we do BRT together. We do group rhythmic movement training. And sometimes that's all we do. And it becomes this moment where they come stressed out and they leave calm and they're ready to tackle the rest of their day. And little by little, they see improvements. And it's just another offering out there to support people.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah. And the group thing is that to be, it's interesting because people oftentimes want one-on-ones because they almost feel like they get more specific attention, which I can understand. But I do believe that the group, there's something so healing about being in community with each other and helping each other through it. So I love the fact that that's a part of your offerings as well, because I have found so much benefit to having small groups of people, you know, support each other through this stuff.
Well, I've used you and the applied quantum biology sort of models as frameworks to sort of imitate. It's not identical, but the other desire that I have is that anybody that I work with one-on-one has a container to go to when they're ready, so that they're not all of a sudden now dealing with this on their own.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important because, like you said, a one-on-one, maybe we'll meet once a week if lucky, once every 3 months, and sometimes it has to happen. And what about the time in between? It is nice to have a place where we can touch in and touch base and just
there is that too.
Continue to make sure. Yeah, exactly. So,
and one more thing that I have to remember now to say, because I haven't been, but now I'm ready because I've got the pieces in place. I do this in Spanish too.
Oh, yay. That's amazing.
Yes.
I love it. Yeah. So no, highly recommend if you resonate with what Amanda's talking about. She just shows up time and time again every time I am with her, and it's just such a pleasure. So please, we'll make sure that in the description we'll have a link to your website and a way to get a hold of your access your information. So Amanda, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for continuing your deep dive journey, and because every deep dive it looks like you do, it's just bringing you into just such a cooler and cooler understanding of the human body and how to support and help people with what they're showing up with.
Yeah, well, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for doing what you've been doing and what you're continuing to do. It's inspirational. It's really neat. I'm proud of you, Carrie. This is awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you so much.
Yeah.